Welcome back to Rainbows and Razor Blades, a show from the void. By the Gregorian calendar, it is still currently the 26th day in the 11th month, the month of November, year of the Lord 2022. We come live now from Albany's Rural Cemetery in Menands, New York, and we are on the bridge near the river. So, I want to talk about pressure, emotional pressure, spiritual pressure, physics, right? You see how this is just kind of a part of, I guess, fluid physics, although I'm not a physicist, right? But you see how it gets faster because the pressure increases. And when pressure increases, things can sometimes get faster. And so a lot of the time what will happen with, say, like a political movement, right, is that all at once it'll kind of hit like a boiling point. And then once that happens, there's like a phase transition as it starts to turn to gas, and there's a spillover in the lid itself. Is there an equitability? I'm not going to sit here and pretend like an army of women with guns is going to be even able to hold up a fight against an army of males with guns. I think there's a possibility that could happen, but it seems unlikely that will happen. Like, it doesn't seem very likely. Like, the war of the genders seems unlikely. Also, there's this interesting thing that now that Christianity can't control your perception of what reality is, or it can't teach you, like, chromosomes. Like, when Christianity was created, chromosomes didn't exist. Christianity has only started recently talking about chromosomes because it makes the people who are talking about it sound intellectual rather than religious. But it's not a scientific argument. Like, yes, we get it. But before they knew about chromosomes, they knew about penis and vagina. And if you want to reduce it to that, you can, but it's an argument that you have to get over. Because you just do. Like, it's not... And even if you don't believe me and you're like, I disagree, that's your opinion, fine. But you haven't stopped the existence of somebody from creating themselves in the image that is, like, directly antithetical and proves your worldview is incompatible with reality. Like, you can tell them that they're delusional, but you can't tell them that they don't exist. And that's the struggle of conservatism. And so what you get is a system together that asserts itself however it can, and it chooses values. It chooses them, right? As where it knows that it is either safe to uphold or unsafe to uphold. And where it is safe to uphold, they do so, and they try to, we'll say, justify it, right? Like, it's actually a moral good to have a patriarchy, because look what we created. We created metal, we created digital technology. Men did this, not women, men. And actually, to pretend like women could do men's work is missing the point of what men's work is. Because, yeah, you're right. I'm not going to sit here and argue with that. Yes. So what then? So this is the retard's argument, the retard libtard. So what, Sarah? Women just can't do men's work? So it's like, no, they can, but it's still men's work. It doesn't become women's work just because a woman's doing a man's work, right? Similarly, a man can generally not do women's work the way that a woman could. But it can, other than, like, specific things that men are obviously trying to control, like breeding, like actually, like, birthing, right? But short of that, like, what really is there? That's the question. Should we go straight up this? People. Hopefully that's my sermon. So the concept of an enforced, not just a constructed, but an enforced patriarchy puts a certain type of pressure on the things that it's keeping dammed up, right? And if sometimes what happens is if that dam starts to leak, it has to be patched. And that's why they're spending so much effort trying to fight against trans people, because it removes their ability to control females and breeding. It undermines the legitimacy of the entirety of that crown, right? It takes away the foundation of what you're constructing your entire society upon. Because if people start to question those moral axioms, what's going to actually happen is that where those are questioned, sometimes that they can be changed, but like actionably so. Now, let's give like the most terrifying example of this. Like, let's run the thought experiment the worst way we can. Child consent laws, right? One day it's illegal to have a 14-year-old bride. The next day it's encouraged. More than that, it's assigned to you under God, right? Now, there's nothing stopping that from happening again, because it's not like that didn't happen before. It's not like that's inconceivable. Actually, that was the default. There's really not a lot stopping that from switching back to the default. Well, actually, I take that back. There is a lot stopping it. But part of what at least keeps it enforced is that we have a legal system. Now, we also have a church. And the church is kind of dastardly in that it wants the age to be 14. It may not be explicit. It actually has more to do with just like the ability to breed, regardless of what age that pops up healthily. You know, that isn't my argument to make. But the church looks at it as like, how many women do we actually control? How many daughters can we create, right? To then tyrannize or choose to let them live in prosperity and in equity, where our equity is graciously bestowed upon them, right? Oh, I'm a justice warrior. I'm a female. I go my own way. I'm a lesbian. Good for you. So what are you good for then? What are you gonna do to help us build society for us and our children? We're the ones building society, is the argument, right? You are just degenerate and share this earth with us secularly and in our faces and in spite of us. Right, that's the position. I mean, that really is the position. Maybe not every single Christian soul believes that. That's not the point. But the way that the hierarchy of the established norms asserts itself is top down. The man of the house decides what is happening, and that's a very natural thing. The problem is when that also tries to assert itself indefinitely upon its own daughters, even if their own daughters would break from that paradigm. The way that this single tree, when it fell 2 years ago, look how far it has pushed the river now. It doesn't take much to push a river. It does not take much. The larger trend of these, right? You can't change reality. Male and female are already established. Maybe 100 million years from now, 100,000 years from now, there won't be male and female, and we'll actually develop some scientific way to evolve wombs for men. Who cares, right? Well, actually, I think females would stop existing at that point. Or they would exist, but they'd exist as trophies. Something to be coveted and just like used as an object. Which is kind of how it is with men too. The other interesting thing to think about is that homosexuality is frowned upon, but explicitly necessary for the continuity of a church. Like, there are certain roles that it can't purge even its own undesirables, because it needs its own undesirables to do that dirty work. For example, molesting little boys. You're not going to convince a straight male priest to do that. I mean, I'm sure maybe you could make the argument you could. I wouldn't go about trying to do that, nor would I go about joining a church for this reason. Because the pedophilia is built into it. It's hard baked into it. It may not be explicitly written about, right, in their brochures, and it may not be explicitly talked about in their sermons, but it's definitely something that behind closed doors they talk about with, like, Father whoever. Like, yes, Father Joseph, Father Gregory, Father whatever fucking pedophile you put in charge to molest the boys. Right? The Jews are a little more obvious with it. They mutilate their babies. They just sexually castrate part of their penis. And, good luck making moral apology for that. And yet people do. Worse than that, they've been so demoralized and indoctrinated that they'll make these like cockamamie arguments like, well, it feels better and looks better. It's like, so you want to decide that for an infant? It seems a little bit anti-science to me. People really value science these days. Where does science get us? Does it take us away from God? Does it take us closer to God? I think it's everyone's individual choice. But I know that in aggregate, it takes us considerably further away from God. And it undermines the power of the patriarchy. Even if the patriarchy can use it to create like war machines and unveilings of the new bomber that Northrop Grumman's going to be showing us. that they created sometime during like the early 2000s, late 2000s, whenever the fuck they created, probably the fucking 90s. We just don't know about it. But they're gonna show us it. Because right now, I mean, people have seen it, but they scrub the internet pretty quickly. And, you know, next generational warfare is... We don't know how kinetic that's going to be. But we know that there's definitely people that are going to push the fringe edges of what technology can do. And we know that those people are going to be men. They may hire some women to, like, do math and design stuff, but that's not who's doing it. It's just not. And here's why. Even if the women wanted to, like I said, yeah, you could find a woman that can do man's work. You can definitely find me a physicist and an antisocial woman who takes the position that we need more war machines and she, by God, is going to create them. Good. But the men won't hire her. See what I mean? Now, this is not moral apology for patriarchy. It's just how it is. Any more than I'm gonna attack baboons for spanking their females. Slowly, the change is coming. Each leaf you can think about as a person. The tree is just the changing of an idea. And you can see why the binary breaking of gender has been so firmly enforced, because now look at it. It's going around what it used to be, and now the power is here. It's not over there. And that's very threatening to the church. Threatening to the patriarchy. It's threatening to the kind of the foundational spiritual elemental feelings over hundreds of thousands of years from the time when we were mammals smaller than whatever. It's the time of the chimpanzees. Well, no, we didn't actually evolve from chimpanzees. That's kind of a meme to think that we did. Can't bring that with me. It's all wet and muddy, but we can come back next time and collect that. Every time I come around, it's like, oh, they didn't do it. Welcome back to Rainbows and Razor Blades, a show from Providence Royal Cemetery today, November 27th, 2022. I wish I had my guitar. I'd play For the Crow. The name of the song is For the Crow, so it's like, it is a song written to the crow. People can listen to it, but it's written to the crow. Will you sit here beside me as I play for the crow, for the crow? Such a good song. I wish I had my guitar so bad. I was like thinking about bringing it, but then I was thinking it'd be too much of a pain in the ass and that it'd probably be too cold for the wood, but I definitely am mistaken. It would have been just fine, and now I wish I had it. It's just kind of like one of those things that, you know, you make a decision, sometimes you regret it. But it sucked because, like, I knew that if I didn't bring it, I'd regret it if I didn't have it. But the idea was that it was a safety concern. And, you know, I usually take the safety first. That's just kind of my nature. Wow, but boy, I wish I had my guitar to play For the Crow. So, red maple, it says. It's kind of a cool selfie. Gross. I was just reading about the Haudenosaunee, the people of the Longhouse, the Iroquois Confederacy, which is like basically the nation that was here before the you know, the Dutch came, because the Dutch were the first to colonize like roughly this region. And you know, I was reading about the and the Mohicans, which occupied like the upper part of the Hudson River Valley. And they were at war with the Mohawks, who kind of occupied kind of where I'm at. They probably wouldn't have been exactly right here, but well, you never know. I like this noise, so I stopped to record. Ooh, yeah, there it is. Ooh, that was a good one. It's not doing it anymore. It's a shame. Well, anyways. So, it's funny, I always say the Spanish, but the Dutch. And, the Spanish did eventually show up, and so did the French, and so did the English. But the Dutch, it was a Dutch port, and they used it for pelting, like removing of animal furs, for, whatever they're going to do with that, and as wide an industrial scale as they can. Resource extraction. Anyways, I keep hearing stuff. It's weird. Anyway, we'll be back after this. I was just reading more. I'm realizing like how little I actually know. Like I don't know nothing, but I don't really know the nuanced details of any of it. Like I don't know like the same way that I can tell you like what year World War I was. I can't really tell you like what year that the Dutch colonized this area. I guess it was like the 1600s, like early 1600s, but by the mid 1600s, like 1640s, it was transferred over to the English. It was surrendered to the English under some dude, to the crown. And at that time, New York kind of came into existence, and it's, it's been an English colony kind of ever since. Never really changed. Just because it's the United States doesn't really mean it isn't the same colonial will. Now it's its own thing. Now it's truly its own, empire and its own, assertedly independent nation on kind of the other side of the world, low-key, from Europe. But yeah, I mean, I was reading about it because I have this like nagging thought in my head that somewhere in the summer I was talking about flowers and I was talking about Native Americans, and I said the Spanish, and like it's haunting me. I'm like, shit, I got that so wrong. Like I knew it was wrong, I just didn't correct it because it was the English, which is so different. Like Texas was like New Spain, right? Like that was like the Spanish when they came through. That's where they hit. Like they hit lower. Like they hit like Mexico and stuff like that. Well, what is now today Mexico? So yeah, the French and the English were at war, kind of like the whole area, like in Maine, like that area, and then above that, kind of around the lake, to the left of that, whatever that lake's called, I forget the name, one of the Great Lakes, and what today is part of Canada, but my area was decidedly English, and that's like kind of an important fact to get wrong. If you're gonna get that wrong, it's kind of like, oof. So I have a feeling that like somewhere in the past like year or so, I put out some like pretty seriously wrong disinformation, which like it's fine. It's not like the end of the world or anything like that, but it doesn't mean that I'll probably have to private that if someone like comes up with that someday and is like, yeah, you did say that. How dare you? I'll be like, oh, I know. Like I know I give the disclaimer as like a meme, like the following program is not intended for children and is a disinformation campaign, blah 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 blah. Like I get that that's like a whole thing, but I mean the intent obviously is not to get things wrong. I'm not actually trying to be a disinformation campaign, but I do get things wrong and I don't check my sources or citations. But today I'm checking my sources and citations, and like, I'm getting quite a few things wrong, I'm finding, which really isn't a surprise, but it makes me wonder what else I think that I know. Like thinking you know something, like the Dunning-Kruger effect, is dangerous. It's dangerous, especially if you're like me and you're trying to like sermon. Like I feel like that's the type of thing that you should like get right, at least if you're going to be talking about like native history and stuff. It's kind of important, like when did they actually lose their land. Like I was also reading a little bit about the Tuscarora. I won't really tell their story, but to my understanding it was I'm gonna get canceled if I go this way. We'll just go this way and change the subject. We'll be back after this. This book series called Junie B. Jones. Some of y'all probably read that. It's weird books. I don't really remember what any of them were about. There's also another one called The Boxcar Children, which, like, I remember I loved it, but again, I can't remember anything what it was about. And then there was like there's like a bunch of these like weird little kids books that were just like in my childhood that were otherwise completely meaningless. And it's interesting that like the deepest parts of those reefs, the deepest parts of those books, you know, were so hollow and so meaningless and so like fundamentally arbitrary that they didn't stick the way that something like Harry Potter, which is a more well-constructed, you know, representation of archetype. You can listen to Jordan Peterson suck Harry Potter dick. Sorry, ex-daddy Dr. Jordan Peterson. Oh yeah, we're on the deer trails now, folks. But Sarah, you'll get ticks if you don't treat your clothing with permethrin. Huh? You gotta spray chemicals on your clothing. But Sarah, someone I know has Lyme disease. You'll get ticks. Everyone's so afraid of ticks. I'm just like, who cares, dude? They're just little bugs. You just, oh no, a bug's on me. Then you take the bug off. How hard is it to notice a fucking bug on you? Like, I've always just thought people were crazy the way they would be acting about ticks. Like, have you ever found a tick on you? I'm like, yes, so have you. Fucking thing. Like, what? Like, oh, I'm sorry, you're asking me, have I ever lived outside and been outside? Like, yes. Look how big this is. Representative of his wealth status. And maybe the Joel Howard Rathbone. With a name like Rathbone, you know it's son of Joel and something Rathbone. Emmeline. Born June 11th, 1835. Died 18... So he was only 30. He was my age when he died. Damn. He requested that these words might be inscribed on his monument. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but rave everlasting? Really? Really? Is that really what it says? Oh no, have. It's an H, not an R. I thought that said rave. I was like, they'll rave everlasting life? I was like, that's hardcore. But no, he was just a Jesus freak. Yeah, how'd that go for you, dude? How's your eternal life going? You died at my age. Not to shake up the faith or anything. Good luck with eternity. I mean, to be fair, though, he does get kind of the biggest thing. What was he, balding? Was that him? There's no shot that's a 30-year-old. No shot. That was like a 60-year-old.